Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. This week we have Goes from MMA Junkie Radio, my co-host on the podcast, as well as the creator of Spinning Back Clique. That's why we're here every week, because of him. Mike Vaughn, a titan, an MMA media titan, killed it on the red carpet for us last week, killed it covering UFC 282 for him. Fist bump for him for that. Our overseas correspondent, Ada Hanoun. I thought I was cool rocking this. Look at that Moroccan kit. It is global. Good luck to them in the World Cup. Of course, we got Ken on the ones and twos. That's cold coffee. And here come the topics. All right, this past Saturday night, Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz fought to a split draw in the main event at UFC 282. Scores of 48-47 for Blachowicz, 48-46 for Ankalaev, and a 47-47 draw were not well received by the crowd inside the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, nor around the world on social media. An overwhelming amount of media, fans, fighters, MMA notables, they thought Ankalaev did enough to win the UFC's undisputed light heavyweight title. Heck, even Jan Blachowicz told Joe Rogan, quote, "Give the belt to Ankalaev, end quote, as Rogan was interviewing Ankalaev. If this wasn't enough heartbreak for the Russian, during the post-fight press conference, UFC President Dana White announced that Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill would be fighting for the vacant title next month in Brazil at UFC 283. Lots to unpack here. Give us your thoughts on the scoring of the fight, the new title fight, and finally, did you share the same sentiment as El Presidente White, who thought the fight was terrible? Go, start things off.
No, I actually thought the fight wasn't that bad, man. The decision was awful, okay? The fight itself, not everything's going to be a barn burner, okay? Look at the situation that they were in. Like, I wasn't so disgusted with this fight as other people, especially Dana White. I think he just went a little overboard with his take on all this. It really, in my opinion, was not fair. You have to take into consideration the circumstances revolving around these fights. Like, a couple weeks ago, these guys didn't even know what was going on, all right? And they're finding this out. Blachowicz finding this out once he got off the plane. Like, come on, man. Like, you can't just come out and perform and just put on a barn burner just because in an important situation like that. I think instead of criticizing your fighters, you have to look back and say, well, look, these guys kind of helped us out when we really needed it. How about we give some props to Ankalaev? Like, he fought that fight, most of it on one leg, then at the end on no legs. How about we give some praise there at a guy that really pushed forward and tried to keep everything together in this fight? I thought he did more than enough to win this fight. I don't know why the judges had it this way. It's really gut-wrenching. We were doing our watch-along with a fighter and with a coach, and just seeing the looks on their faces, especially when we wrapped up, not knowing going forward what it is you have to do to get a victory. In our jobs, we all know what we have to do to get ahead in life. But when you do those things and it doesn't pan off, that's a scary thing for an athlete. It's really bad, man. This is something that we have to get a hold of. But that decision in the fight was completely wrong. I thought Ankalaev did enough to win this fight. And it's not a good look to have Jan Blachowicz come in and do that as well and say, yeah, I thought he won the fight. Like, I mean, think about how lopsided everything that's going on in that fight, all the damage that he's taken, and even he can kind of figure out he did not win that fight. This was not a good outcome.
Goes, you're right on MMA decisions. Like 95% of the media thought that Ankalaev won. Different types of scores, but still giving the nod to Ankalaev. Mike Bond, you were there at the T-Mobile. You probably had a different feeling than us watching it at home. You felt this whole thing. You watched it there up close.
Yeah, at that point of the event, I think we got 10 straight finishes. We had kind of, the Paddy Pimblett walkout, which was, such a great atmosphere. I think by the time we got into that main event, got into those championship rounds, it had really slowed down. And I think the crowd had kind of lost its energy a lot. And it wasn't the most exciting fight in the world. So just kind of the peaks and valleys of the emotions through that card. By the time we got there, I understand why people thought it was kind of ho-hum. Maybe they weren't paying the closest attention. Dana White said he was zoning out. So, I don't blame him necessarily. It's hard to, keep that same level of enthusiasm from start to finish on a 7-hour fight card. But as far as the fight itself, I don't feel as strongly about the decision in Ankalaev's favor as Goes does. I can see a case for the draw. I can see the case for the Ankalaev scorecard. I struggle more so to give Jan Blachowicz a winning scorecard in this fight, but the other two I'm pretty okay with at this point. especially as we kind of get a little more time to look back further on it. So, like obviously a disappointing outcome. You don't want a draw in a title fight. It's not ideal. Only the 5th time in UFC history that we've had this type of scenario in a championship setting, but it happens, and especially as the judges are further encouraged to score 10-8 rounds and things like that, it leads to more situations like this. So craziness, but look what kind of fell into the UFC's lap here. They needed a main event badly for Brazil. The Figueiredo Moreno 4th fight was not going to be enough to carry that event on itself, and they were able to kind of parlay this into a new situation and spin it forward. I think if maybe Ankalaev had come out completely unscathed, maybe they had gone to him and offered him this opportunity against Glover first, but he was in no condition to fight in a month from now, and I don't think Jan Blachowicz was either. So this is what it led to. The UFC's kind of just sliding the pieces together, trying to plug in holes, and here we are, just a crazy, weird situation.
All right, so Mike, let me ask you this though. When I think of terrible, I think of Rose versus Carla Part 2, Derek versus Ngannou, real huge letdowns, maybe even Woodley versus Maya. This one, I felt it was compelling because Blachowicz had found a way, a path to victory, and he's chopping down those legs, maybe one more, and the ref might wave it off. Maybe Ankalaev doesn't stand up, so then Ankalaev makes an adjustment mid-fight, and like Go said, both guys digging deep. Maybe the casual fans in the T-Mobile weren't getting it, but geez, I thought it was pretty compelling and pretty interesting, and again, one of them was going to walk away with the belt. We didn't know who. Was it really that quiet in the arena, or did they really just take the excitement out of it in those last few rounds?
I don't think it was that bad. I do think Dana's criticism there a little too harsh. I mean, calling it terrible, I don't know if I would go to that extreme, but it wasn't, the fight of the night. It wasn't a great fight really by any stretch. It was just kind of a fight that happened, a 5-rounder. Neither of these guys had trained, as Go's kind of alluded to, for 5 rounds. It was shifted on very short notice to this situation. So, they weren't fully prepared to, I think, put the pedal to the metal for that type of fight. And, if we're being real here, Magomed Ankalaev has fights that can be like this. I mean, when he is at his most dangerous, he can be a killer in there, but there's a lot of passive moments from him in there as well. And this is kind of a situation that led to it. He was compromised in there. But yeah, I do think that calling it terrible is pretty harsh, but I think you're just seeing Dana's frustration come out in that moment, because this fight that we got here was like plan D for them, right? Going from the Yuri Prochazka Glover Teixeira fight to them offering Glover and Ankalaev, and then now we get Glover and Jan and Ankalaev. So yeah, it's just, I think, not the ideal ending for the final pay-per-view of the year. I don't think this is like the taste Dana White wanted to have left in the fans' mouth at the end of the year, the pay-per-view buyers, especially after such an amazing card leading up to it. I think maybe he overreacted in the moment, but I understand, I guess, where his frustration may have come from in that moment.
All right. And Fada, before I get to you, let me check Reese here in the chat room. He says he did not. He said he did not win, but he probably agrees that he did not lose either. Yes, Reese, you're right. But then as Rogan's interviewing Ankalaev, he literally says, give the belt to Ankalaev. I mean, to me, that's a form of acknowledging that the other guy won. So maybe you didn't stick around for the whole interview. Fada, to you.
Well, actually, Blachowicz tweeted earlier, I don't know if it was him or his management, but he tweeted earlier that what he meant was that he didn't think he won, but he also didn't think he lost. I felt like Joe Rogan kind of coerced him into saying that he lost that fight. He kind of pressured him into saying it. He's like, I didn't like that too much. But again, I mean, Jan Blachowicz just went 5 rounds. He was getting grounded and pounded to end the fight. I mean, he's not exactly thinking like, okay, I won this round, I won that round. But I do feel like he was pressured into saying that. I do respect where he's coming from. He kind of although he took a little dig at Ankalaev saying that I didn't cry, I kind of did it with honor. But the reality is the visual in round 5 of him getting grounded and pounded, I think when you walk away from that visual, that being the last thing you see in the fight, Ankalaev won. I rewatched the fight. I do think Ankalaev won. But the scoring for me, there were 2 questions. Round 1, I thought could have gone to Ankalaev. I think it was awarded, if I'm not mistaken, to Blachowicz by all 3 judges, or maybe 2 of the judges. But I felt like Ankalaev could have won that first round. I liked the body work that he did. Close round, though. 2 and 3 I gave to Blachowicz. I thought obviously the leg kicks did a lot of damage. Damage is very important in a fight, and when you have close striking exchanges, that's a glaring thing. And he did a lot of damage, almost TKO'd him with leg kicks. So I gave 2 and 3 to Blachowicz. I thought 4 was clearly ankleized. I also thought, of course, 5 was clearly ankleized, but I don't know about the 10-8. That's something that, 2 judges gave him a 10-8. So those were the 2 things. Regardless, I felt like Ankalaev won the fight. But again, first, I didn't think it was terrible. Second of all, I'm not screaming, how do you call a draw, a robbery maybe? But I'm not screaming robbery for that. I just thought round 1 was very close and could have gone to Blachowicz, could have gone to Ankalaev. And round 5 could have not necessarily been 10-8 to Ankalaev. He did control him. He did have one moment in that round where he was almost going to stop him, but it wouldn't have been crazy to me if they gave it 10-9. So just the scorecards of 1 and 5 could have changed the overall scorecards. But I did think Ankalaev won. And I thought it was a little crazy that they moved on with Teixeira and Hill. But like Mike said, I don't even know if they asked Ankalaev, but even if they did, he was limping. Maybe that leg damage would have gone after a week. Maybe it was just swelling. We don't know. But maybe at least ask him, even though he looked compromised, but just at least ask Ankalaev if he was down to take the fight. But I guess Dana was frustrated and wanted to move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry to look away while you were talking, but I did have the scores here, and all the judges did have Blachowicz in round 1, Blachowicz in round 2. All of them had Ankalaev in round 4 and 5. 2 of the judges did go the route of 10-8, but really, really identical scores. If Sal D'Amato goes 10-9 as opposed to 10-8, Blachowicz is champ. And if Michael Bell agrees with Derek Cleary and goes 10-9 the other way, Ankalaev is champ. So it was that close, but the judges were pretty consistent in that regard. We got to move on to the next topic, but I do want to pass on from Nick Bernard. He says, good luck to Morocco. That's for you, Fada. All right, we're going to go on to topic 2. The co-main event at UFC 282 was not without controversy either. Yet again, a large majority of MMA media and fans online and in the arena thought Jared Gordon did enough to defeat Paddy Pimblett via decision. Did you agree with the result? Also, either way, how do you feel about Pimblett's progression towards being a superstar or even bigger superstar, and as well as a world champion? Mike, it's your turn to start things off.
Oh boy, where do we even start with this one, right? Like, what a just crazy ending, crazy decision. I do not agree with the result here by any stretch of the imagination. Sitting cage side, I thought very clearly that Jared Gordon won this fight. I think you could make a case that he won all 3 rounds. I mean, sitting there from my perspective, cage side, not being able to listen to commentary, not getting every single camera angle of all the punches and the replays and stuff, I thought Jared Gordon won this fight pretty clearly. So maybe things will change upon like a further deep dive on a rewatch, but I think a lot of people agree with my sentiment here. And you can see that from all the fellow fighters, the media, scored the fight on MMAdecisions.com. Like, there's not a big section of people who thought Paddy Pimblett won this fight. He might be one of the only few out there, along with like his teammates and his family and stuff. So yeah, this was one that, obviously a pretty big controversy here. I don't know if I would go as far as calling it like the biggest robbery of all time, as we saw a few fighters. I think Phil Rowe tweeted that out, and there was a lot of harsh criticism here. But yeah, you put Paddy Pimblett on this pedestal here and give him this platform, and then an outcome happens like this. A lot of people are going to be outraged, especially when he is already such a polarizing kind of personality. There's a lot of, good that Paddy Pimblett's tried to do with his foundation and the thing he said in his post-fight interviews and things like that. But there's also a lot of, suspect, controversial stuff, things that he tweeted out when he did have a Twitter account before getting banned. So he makes people feel a certain way. And as you talk, George, about trending towards being a superstar, I mean, all the biggest superstars in MMA history have elicited that same feeling out of the fans, media, etc. You love them, you hate them, at least they make you feel something to a degree. And that's what you want as a fighter in the sport. The worst thing that can happen is have people not care about you. But the question is, do the skills align with the push he is getting, the placement he is getting, and how he's kind of being framed maybe by the UFC, by certain other people? And I think right now the answer to that is pretty clearly no. Jared Gordon, we're not trying to disrespect him here by any stretch of the imagination. He is a solid fighter. He's done good work in the UFC, but he is he's outside the top 20, maybe even outside the top 30 as far as ranked lightweights in the world. And we saw how Paddy Pimblett struggled with him, whether you thought he won or lost. This was not a blowout by any means. So for the fight to play out this way, and for Paddy to go and kind of react that, there's no controversy here, I could see how a lot of people are upset. And there's going to definitely need to be some big strides if he hopes to kind of have his actual trajectory in terms of the wins and the climbing the rankings align with the push he is getting promotionally. So there's definitely some work to do for Paddy. I think he should look back at this one with a little more humility and realize that this was not, a dominant fight for him, and that he needs to work on certain things of his game if he wants to compete with upper echelon lightweights. I don't think he's ready for that yet. Maybe he will in time, but if you're comparing it to, a Conor McGregor rise or something, which is obviously the most extreme example, Conor didn't really have any fights like this on his come up to being the featherweight champion. So I don't think the trajectories are really all that similar.
Eagle FC super lightweight Kevin Lee once told us, if you ain't got haters, you ain't popping. So I guess Pimblett is popping because the hate's everywhere. Check out Michael Joel in the chat. He says, liar, liar, Paddy was given a Christmas gift early. There's no way in hell he won that fight. We're 36 hours removed, and you can tell Michael Joel's pissed off. Bada, how about you? Give us your takes on all this.
Yeah, I think what harmed Paddy the most was his post-fight comments, because he fought hard. Like, I went back and watched the fight. You can't fault him. He fought hard. I didn't think he won the fight, but you can't fault him for his performance because he fought hard. I think it's the post-fight comments that kind of hurt him. He didn't necessarily have to be like, I didn't win this fight, because it takes a certain amount of humility. I remember Guram Kutateladze did that in his UFC debut against Mateus Gamrot, and he got a lot of respect for that, although that was a very close fight. But he said, I did not win that fight. So he didn't have to go as far as saying I didn't win that fight, but perhaps him saying that I won the first 2 rounds and I coasted in round 3 was probably because how could you coast after the first 2 rounds, right? They were close. Round 1 was super close. I gave it to Gordon just because of that left hook. He kept finding a home for that left hook, and I felt like he had the more impactful strikes. I do believe he outlanded him as well. Round 2 was really close. I think maybe Pimblett could have stolen it at the end of the round, but again, I could make an argument for Gordon winning that round as well. I did give it to Pimblett. And in round 3, pretty much nothing happened, but Gordon was pressing the action. He had him across the cage. He should have thrown more, would have probably sealed that round a lot easier for him. But regardless, I thought he won that round just because Paddy, he threw up a couple of knees when his back was against the cage, but you can't give him the round because of that. At the end of the day, it was Gordon pressing the action. And I think one judge gave Paddy Pimblett round 3, and I think that's where the big question mark comes. Was it Doug Crosby? Because since this is where it might have been him. But yeah, that for me is obviously a big question mark, because as close as rounds 1 and 2 were, and some people want to give Gordon 30-27, I think round 3 is the one round you cannot give Paddy Pimblett. That's the most definitive thing I can say about this fight. So I scored it kind of 29-28 for Gordon. I see the argument even for him potentially winning round 2, but I just think it was Paddy's post-fight comments that may have hurt him. I don't think his star is going to decrease or anything like that. I still think he's a big star and stuff like that. But yeah, if we're talking about championship level, ranked contenders, all that, obviously that fight showed that perhaps he's not ready for it just yet. But one fight could change everything, right? So just for Saturday night, perhaps we shouldn't be talking about ranked contenders or Ilia Topuria for that matter, or any of that stuff. I think build them a little slow, kind of, they'll find plenty of matchups for him, but no ranked opposition, I think, just for the time being.
Yeah, usually on a fight weekend, when 2 people have heat, like Topuria and Pimblett, we're all automatically thinking, there you go. That's a layup. Let's book them. Not many people are saying, let's do that one. And I think that alone is speaking volumes as far as what we think Pimblett's progression might have been. Superstar, yeah, he's got a lot of fans, no denying that. All right, how about you, Goes? Chime in.
Well, I mean, he walks away with a W, but I feel like it's a step backwards. I think his stock did drop a little bit. But the thing about the sport, and especially these polarizing figures, is they can just kind of rebuild that very quickly. I think it was more his attitude. He had a few outs in this. When he picked up the mic, he did so many things leading up to this fight that you could easily just say, look, this fight camp, I did a little bit too much. I wasn't as focused. I'm going to taper back on that type of stuff, come back stronger. And we probably would have all forgotten about it, right? But he just doubled down. And on top of that, he thought he won fight of the night. The things that were going on in the press conference, not as many people were laughing as they were pre-fight, right? So I do feel like his stock did drop a little bit. You can't compare your name. You can't put your name in the same sentence as a guy like Conor McGregor and then perform like that, right? It's just not going to add up. A guy like Conor McGregor, yeah, he suffers losses and then he comes back and he's still talking, but he has a body of work that you could refer to where you could always point to that and go, well, look what I've done. Paddy Pimblett hasn't done that yet. So if he's going to talk this amount of trash, he needs something to back that up. And right now he doesn't have it. So it just seems ludicrous to even mention his name with any of these other guys. So yeah, I think he's going to have to go backwards here, guys. I really don't know what he's going to have to do. I think fight in England, right? I mean, you know, those people will be behind you and maybe you can start building momentum again. But if I'm him, I kind of go away for a little bit right now.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm gonna jump in. Sorry, I think it was Chris Lee that gave Paddy Pimblett round 3. So sorry, Doug Crosby. Never thought I'd say that, but sorry, Doug. It was actually Chris Lee that gave Paddy 10-9 for round 3. That I don't agree with at all. But yeah, my bad.
Yeah, Crosby dodges that bullet, but we got some other bullets for him. All right. CJM in the chat says 30-27 for Gordon. Kyle Lane in the chat says 29-28 for Gordon. Yeah, even the fans of the sport are still saying Gordon. I've watched it a couple times. I have 29-28 Gordon. I don't see really much of a case for 29-28 Pimblett. I'm closer to even 30-27 Gordon, but I'm not one of the ones that counts, unfortunately. All right. Topic 3, putting those two fights to the side, the co-main event and main event. The first 10 fights of UFC 282 produced clear winners as they were all finishes, and they all got bonus too. Some of them very, very spectacular. Guys, who in your mind made the biggest impact at UFC 282 outside of the co-main and the main again, and why? Fada, lead off.
I have to say Ilia Topuria. I was kind of raving about him before, so I'm happy he kind of lived up to it. But I've been high on Ilia Topuria for a while now. I did cover his final fight before he got signed to the UFC. Everybody knows, I mean, the new fans that were introduced to him through the UFC look at him as a knockout guy, right? Because he's had 3 out of his 4 UFC wins come by knockout. But if you've watched Ilia Topuria pre-UFC, this guy's a slick grappler. Very high-level jiu-jitsu, got a mean anaconda choke. He's got a mean guillotine. So I knew he was going to be a problem for Bryce. Bryce is a really good fighter, and Bryce is a tough guy with a lot of cardio, with a lot of wrestling. But Ilia tired him out. And at the end of the day, I felt like Ilia was way too well-rounded and too highly skilled. He could finish you everywhere. Ilya's a finisher. He's finished all his fights minus the Yusuf Zalal fight on short notice. He came in short notice. He got a little bit tired. Credit to Yusuf Zalal. He fought off some really, really tough chokes and submission attempts. So credit to him there. But at the end of the day, Ilya's looked fantastic in his run in the UFC. And he submitted Bryce. And I felt like part of him kind of wanted to do that because in the press conference, stuff like that, when people were talking about Ilia Topuria, he was telling guys, like, I'm not a knockout guy. Like, I can grapple because this is not a striker versus grappler match. And I think he proved that. Bryce did get him down, but Ilia worked his way back up and managed to finish the fight by submission. But I'm very high on Ilia Topuria. I feel like he has all the skills. I want to see him at 45. I think he's pretty small. He even fought at 35 back in the day, fought for the 35 Cage Warriors belt, but missed weight, so he wasn't eligible to win the belt. But I think he's good at 45. If he has enough time, he'd probably easily make the weight. I know he fought Jai Herbert at 55. But if he's given the right amount of time, I think he's a serious player in the featherweight division, and I'm excited to see what his future holds.
Fada, you know, at our watch along, we were saying, boy, I'd love to see him versus Volk. Now, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? Because Volk is the top of the heap, but that's how great of a performance he had. Goes, you still feeling that? What were your thoughts? Well, I guess you have your own choice to make, and you can also chime in on Topuria as well.
No, I know exactly what you mean. It's not time for that yet, but
right.
Stylistically, they do a lot of the same things. So I'm kind of with you guys on that one. For me, my choice is Raul Rosas Jr. I mean, guys, remember when you were younger and you were in school and you want to fight at the mall or at the park? You couldn't wait until Monday morning to show up because you were a superstar. People were talking about you at school, fist bumping you, high-fiving you. Now picture all that. But in the UFC, this dude probably slept in the clothes he was going to wear into school today the night before. He's so excited to show up and hear everything from all his fellow classmates, his teachers. This is amazing at his age to be able to perform like this, do something like this. Boy, did his stock go through the roof there. What we do have to remember, though, is he's still a young cat. He's still got to learn stuff. And the problem is he's got to do it in the UFC. That's a tough place to learn. But he's so good at a few things that I think all of this will start to come. This is that new generation of fighters that we've been talking about. And this is big for the UFC because think about when you want to make connections to just certain age groups. If we were all his age in school, you telling me we wouldn't root for this guy? Like, he's just like us. He's literally in my class. This is what they want. This is what the UFC wants. I think this kid could be really good. I think right now he's okay, little by little, a little bit of progression, but not too much. But I think this kid could be something one day.
I think right about now, the class president at his high school probably said, "I resign. It's now Rosa's."
Yeah,
It's
can you
now
imagine?
Rosa's turn to gig. And imagine come prom time, all the requests he's going to get. All right. How about you, Mike Bond? Who was your star of the night?
Rosas Jr. definitely stood out. I mean, he got the biggest pop. The crowd was so into his walkout, so into his fight. You know, they were celebrating his win. It was a pretty cool moment. And I like, what Go said there. I think it's going to be interesting to see his evolution and kind of where he goes, especially once he fights a guy that's able to stop his takedowns. All respect to Jay Perrin, but he hasn't won a fight in the UFC. I don't know if he's exactly the greatest barometer of, someone's potential, but the fact that you can go through that process of going into the UFC at that age with those bright lights and perform like that, it's a pretty amazing thing. So all credit on that front. But the fight that kind of stood out to me was Dricus du Plessis defeating Darren Till. That was a pretty back and forth fight, for a good portion there, but he ultimately just took over there. He caught a second wind. I thought he was gassing in that second round. And then round 3, he just came out and put it on him and was able to finish the fight. And that was a huge win. I mean, I know Darren Till came into this fight extremely prepared. He gave me a chance to sit down with him in the days leading up to this fight. And, he took 13 weeks away from his family, from his newborn baby, who he had only seen once after she was born, from the time he left a training camp. So, he was fully dedicated. Everyone around him was saying how focused he was, how prepared he was. And Dricus was able to go in there and defeat him. So that's a huge win for him. There's definitely some stuff for Dricus to clean up as far as his fight game, but I think he's a guy that is a powerhouse in there, and I think he can make a lot of fun fights going forward in this middleweight division. And I think if the UFC ends up going to Africa, potentially the first event in South Africa, he will be a big piece of the promotional puzzle there. So I think there's a lot of upside to Dricus du Plessis right now, and this win was what he needed to kind of attach something to his name to take his career to the next level.
All excellent choices. I would throw in Jairzinho Rosenstruck. He finally just let him go. And I mean, less than 30 seconds, I believe he was in there with the former policeman in Dacus, and he just
first fighter in UFC history to have 3 knockout wins of 30 seconds or less, George.
Wow. There you go. Yeah, he got down, man. Congrats to Jairzinho, Biggie boy. Hey, real quick here in the chat room, Aiden Samo says, Bryce got bullied and exposed. Would you guys agree with that? Let's go around the horn. We'll start with Fada again. Would you agree with that? I mean, it kind of did look like the flat earther got flattened, but is Topuria maybe just on another level? Because I've always thought that Bryce was pretty legit.
I wouldn't say he got exposed. I just think, like I was saying earlier, that Topuria is very well-rounded, and I think people were looking at Topuria as kind of a knockout guy. If you haven't watched Topuria's career pre-UFC, you wouldn't know that. And like I said, the final fight he had before he got signed to the UFC was his first knockout. He had a nice overhand right, fought on the same card as Guram Kutateladze, actually, had a nice overhand right knockout, and that was his first knockout finish. Everything else had come by submission, and then he kind of fell in love with his striking, and it's become kind of now what he goes for. It's not, he doesn't go into to kind of grapple. And obviously he wasn't going to do that against Bryce Mitchell because that's Bryce's bread and butter. But I don't necessarily think he got exposed. I think Bryce had to work hard to get Topuria down, and he got tired. And Topuria is not a guy you can just shoot on recklessly just because he's got those slick submission skills, whether the anaconda choke, the guillotine. He's got a lot in his arsenal. His jiu-jitsu is very, very high level. And he finished the fight with submission. He wanted to remind people that he's also a grappler. He's also a submission artist. So I don't think necessarily that Bryce got exposed. I just think Ilya's that good.
Mike, he's been plowing through people, and now he's got his camo shorts. I just thought he was going to have a better night. Do you think it was just a bad night at the office?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I don't think I could say it much better than Farah did there. It must be noted that Bryce did have a lot of travel issues getting into Las Vegas, multiple canceled flights, showed up, almost a full day later than he was originally scheduled to. I don't know if or how that may have affected his weight cut, and maybe how that affected the performance. But I think all of that is, maybe kind of making excuses for him to a degree. I think Farr nailed it. Ilya Topuria is just really damn good.
Yeah. How about you guys? Bryce Mitchell, he's all right. He'll be all right.
I don't know. Camo shorts didn't work. I mean, Topuria had no problem finding him, right? Everything he threw landed. It was one of the best performances I've seen at that level. But the one thing about Bryce Mitchell that I still don't understand. I don't know how to process this fight, because he just didn't look like Bryce Mitchell at all. At all. Not even for a second. Yeah. So normally what that would lead me to believe is something may have happened going into this fight, day of. He just didn't look at all like himself. So I really wouldn't know what to expect going forward. But the one thing that I would say, I wouldn't say he was exposed, but maybe his training methods, right? I mean, like, how many of the top dogs do we really see training out of a barn, right? Like, they all have good teammates, good support systems. That's something that if I were him, I would honestly look into, not uprooting and moving somewhere, but maybe spending a couple of weeks somewhere else in a big camp or something, getting better looks, because he really didn't have answers for a lot of things that Topuria was doing.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move to topic number 4 here. Darren Till from Liverpool and Bryce Mitchell took L's on Saturday night. Both were also finished. Over at Bellator the night before, Danny Sabatello, the Italian gangsta, he lost his Grand Prix semifinal. Together with Pimblett's controversial win, whose stock dropped from this group of popular fighters and who can rebound the fastest? Now, remember, Pimblett won, but again, he's kind of like on another stratosphere. His ups and downs are way more volatile. Goes back on you.
Well, I think the thing about Paddy Pimblett was, yeah, he got the victory. Yes, his stock dropped, but I think he'll be able to turn it around. Darren Till, though, that performance may have buried him for some time, all right? The fight wasn't really about Darren Till coming out and winning as much as it was Darren Till coming out and making a statement. And that's what the statement needed to be. I'm back, and I'm somebody that you guys have to worry about at the top of the division. And that didn't happen. Usually Darren Till is a name that we talk about with the big dogs, right? Duplessis is a good fighter, but he's not great. And he got bludgeoned in that first round. I mean, it was really, really bad in round 1. And Darren Till was kind of able to turn things around a little bit, but I honestly think it's because Duplessis was so tired from what he was doing in round 1. I will say this. I do love everything Darren Till said on Instagram. His message to the fans, to everybody. I thought he said all the right things. I think he does have the making of a really good fighter. He just hasn't been able to put it all together. But for us to really take him serious and consider him a top level fighter, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take more than maybe one win. It might take 2, some kind of statement win for us to be talking about him at the level that we were before in the past.
All right, next up is Mike, the stock. Who's went down? Who suffered?
Darren Till for sure. I mean, he's the one that just stands out to me. I mean, this feels like kind of a rock bottom moment for him to a degree. I mean, like, the guys he's been fighting previous to this, very good, big names, former champions, stuff like that, who have accomplished a lot in the sport. He fought an opponent here who has not proven to be on that level yet, has not accomplished what some of these other guys have accomplished. And I think a lot of people looked at this as the rebound fight. You lose a couple in a row, they give you a step back, and you're able to start building yourself back up. And he wasn't able to get that win here, and now it just leaves him in a whole world of mystery. And maybe it sounds like he alluded to another torn ACL that hasn't been confirmed again. How long does that keep him out of the way? He traveled to Thailand, as I said earlier, to do this camp. Like, he kind of pulled out all the stops. He did all the things a skidding fighter should be doing to turn things around, and he still didn't get the results. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, where do you go from here? And then you have Duplessis in the post-fight press conference being like, this guy isn't a middleweight. He's not strong enough. He's not big enough. And that's a problem for Darren Till. I think that's probably true, but he is too big for welterweight. We've seen how brutal those weight cuts have been for him. So he's now in this like no man's land that I'm not sure where he's supposed to go, what he's supposed to do. Obviously, a 175 division would be amazing for him. That's not happening anytime soon. So we don't even need to get into that conversation. So like, what do you do? He's just a lot of things that he needs to answer, a lot of things that he needs to figure out. And it sucks that, at 29, it almost feels like we've seen the peak of Darren Till. I don't want to rule it out that he can, get this thing figured out. We've seen plenty of fighters over the years go on like losing skids and be able to make things happen later in the career. I mean, look at Michael Chandler, what happened in Bellator. He lost these fights to, Will Brooks and stuff, and everyone's like, this isn't the guy anymore. And then look where he is now all these years later. So I never want to close the book completely on any fighter, but in this instance, there's a lot of red flags for Darren Till's career going forward.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too, because after that round 1 where he's getting demolished, he came back and looked pretty sharp in round 2 with the compromised left eye. I thought that thing was just gonna continue to close, and even the beginning of round 3 was okay until till the end. But he's sub 30. He has that going for him. Pulling away is probably a good thing right now. He says he's not retiring. He wanted to be clear about that, but yeah, that he's just a tweener. Welterweight, middleweight, 175 would be so nice. So would 165. It's their actual divisions, folks. In MMA, it's just the UFC doesn't utilize them. Fada, clean up here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Darren Till as well. He's it reminds me of the situation of Kevin Lee. Same thing, like 55 was so brutal for him. He went up to 170 and just didn't get the results that he wanted. But for Darren Till, I think the issue is, he was fighting a guy in Duplessis who's a finisher. The guy's finished every single fight except Brad Tavares, and he did come out with that furious start, and it looked like he was about to get that finish. But Darren Till kind of weathered that early storm, came back in round 2, but it looked like he was getting a little tired. But I think the biggest kind of question mark or worry here is obviously Darren is skilled on the feet, but it's the wrestling. Duplessis is not exactly a D1 wrestler. So when you have a guy like Duplessis who's able to take you down multiple times and finish you on the ground, that's the worrying part. And I know he tried to do those changes. He trained with Hamzat at All Stars. He did his training camp at Tiger Muay Thai, which is probably just to go back to his roots. But that's the kind of the issue here, because when you want to talk about contention and the upper echelon of the division, if people are seeing that as a potential chink in your armor where they could win fights that way, and again, Duplessis is a very good fighter and he could prove to be a future champion. But for Duplessis to win the fight, a guy that usually comes out and tries to knock you out, to win the fight with his grappling, I think those are the issues with Darren Till. A bit of cardio issues and kind of working on the wrestling. I think if he doesn't clean those up, it's going to be hard to put him in a title picture. And it's disappointing because he's so confident. He's beloved by all the fans, and he had a nice rise in the beginning. And to see him 1-5 in his past 6, it's like, where do you go from here, right? He's such a big name. He can still land big fights. People are still going to call him out, but he also needs to rebuild. And that's what this Duplessis fight was supposed to be. But unfortunately for him, it didn't go his way. So if he does have a torn ACL, again, he's been injury plagued as well. So just a tough spot for him. And I think some time off, but he did try and make some changes. So he even said it, like, where do I go from here? He seems to be in a bit of a quandary as well.
Mm-hmm. Mike, do we know what happened in round 1 when he must have turned like 3 times to the ref to complain about something? But in the meantime, he's eating knuckle sandwiches left and right.
I couldn't tell. It was on our side of the cage, but his back was turned, so I didn't hear what he was said. It got pretty loud in there, especially as Dricus is hammering away with those punches and stuff. So yeah. I don't know exactly what it was. Would have to talk to Darren directly, but yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I felt like he took some damage there while talking to the referee rather than defending. But hey, look, the chat room's blowing up. Y Ben Kraft says Gastelum and Till are too small for middleweight. We could come up with a list of how many are too small for middleweight, too big for welterweight, and that 75 weight class would work perfectly. Me Diamond 44 says Darren is done. It's okay to say it. Man, I would disagree. I can think of another Englishman that had a long road to the title, but he got there. I don't even think I need to name him, so don't give up on these guys just yet. We got to go to topic number 5 here. Bellator, the Bellator Bantamweight World Grand Prix had its 2 semifinals this past Friday at Bellator 289. Rafion Stotts defeated Danny Sabatello, and Patchy Mix defeated Magomed Magomedov. Was this the best possible outcome for Bellator? Who is your early lean, and how do you feel that fighter, meaning whoever wins between Mix and Stotts, would match up versus their undisputed champion, Sergio Pettis? Leading off, it's back to Mike Bond.
Yeah, I guess given the scenario, this was probably the best outcome for them. Obviously, the ideal situation would have been having Sergio Pettis be in this tournament and not have it be like an interim title Grand Prix tournament, which kind of makes it all kind of strange. But I think Rafael Stotts is proving himself to be a pretty damn good fighter, and Patchy Mix is as well. I mean, I think both these guys put them against some of the best in the UFC. Not saying they beat them all, but I think they're competitive with their top 15 fighters. And I'd like to, maybe see those fights one day in the future. But yeah, I think this is probably the ideal outcome for Bellator. You could go the route and say hey, Danny Sabatello is going to talk some crazy mess and they'll lead up to a fight with Patchy Mix or whoever he fights. And for Bellator, that always needs to, gain traction and notoriety when it struggles in that regard. Having someone out there like Danny who will say whatever to catch a headline is maybe in their better interest from a promotional side. But when you look at, the actual skill set, it's pretty, it's tough to watch sometimes from Danny Sabatello. And I think that fight proved it. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of action in that one against Stotts. He pretty much has the same game plan every time, and we need to see some evolution before the skills meet up with what he's talking about and, what comes out of his mouth about his opponents. So there's some work to do there. And I think from a skill versus skill perspective, absolutely, this is the ideal final.
All right, Fada, would you agree with Mike, or do you have your own pairing?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, Sabatello does bring, I guess, the eyes for them, and he talks a lot of trash and says a lot of controversial stuff or whatever it is he says. But I think from a skill standpoint, this is the fight to make. And then, of course, Sergio Pettis working in the wings. If Stotts ends up winning, it's kind of the teammate thing that will bring its own drama. We never know, right? It seems like they're always cool, and then once they end up getting booked against each other, things arise, and someone will say something in an interview that will upset the other person. All of a sudden, I feel like it breaks up these kind of friendships. So if Stotts does end up beating Mix, it's going to lead to a pretty cool storyline with Sergio Pettis. Hopefully they don't go down that road. That's all I'm saying I want to see. But obviously we've seen very infamous ones with Rashad and John Jones. The list goes on and on. But I think from a skill standpoint, I absolutely agree with Mike that this was the fight for Bellator, the best case scenario. And, Danny Sabatello, good wrestler, but I think he needs to kind of round out his game a little bit better. But I feel like he'll get his big spots and stuff like that. But I thought, he needs more work to do, be a bit more well-rounded, especially in a Grand Prix like that, if you're going to want to fight for the title. So his performance, I didn't think his stock went up too much from his performance. Maybe he did a great job of marketing it, but not so much in his performance. So yeah, I think this was the best case scenario for Bellator.
Nice pull there with Rashad and Jones. That's over a decade old. I remember it was little brother, big brother. And yeah, you're right. We've seen a lot of friendships, I mean, Colby and Jorge used to party at the Palms in Las Vegas. Bitter enemies. Artem and Connor, who would have thought that them two would, no longer be exchanging Christmas cards? I don't think they should expect one from each other. All right, how about you guys? Did you like the way this thing worked out for Bellator, or do you think Bellator liked the way it worked out for Bellator?
That's a tough question, man. I think it worked out and then it didn't, right? The finals are set. I think they're happy with that matchup. But the thing about Grand Prix, what they're set out to accomplish is to tell us who the best fighter at that weight class is, right? I don't know that we're going to have that at the end of the Grand Prix because we still have to unify, right? So that kind of leaves things in a little bit of a confusion. I don't know that you have that, in Pride when all the confetti's falling down. It feels like there's still unfinished business. So that takes away a little bit from the Grand Prix. Where it did work out, though, is I think proving that the division is something to be reckoned with. When we talk about bantamweights, all we usually talk about is the UFC and just how insane it is over there. But Bellator, I think, has proven they got some talent over there. There are some good fighters over there. And I think that was to Bellator's benefit here, being able to showcase these guys. Now, when you get to Sergio Pettis, it's actually been so good that you could take Sabatello, you could take Mix, you could take Stotts, and I think I would still favor them over Sergio Pettis. That's how good they've looked throughout this tournament. So it's pretty interesting, man, what's going on over there. But at the end, I think the end product for Bellator will be something favorable.
Bantamweight, my favorite division right now. It's popping worldwide. And guess what? Perfect transition to one of our additional topics because we have time here on Spinning Back Clique. Chat room, I'm going to get back to you in just a second. I'm keeping an eye on some of you. You guys are really, really tearing it up there. I love it. All right. Earlier in the week, this is important. Former UFC bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw notified the UFC of his decision to retire from competing in MMA. Initially, Dillashaw's publicist told R. Mike Bond that the retirement news was false, and adding that Dillashaw planned to fight, quote, into his 40s. This news wasn't well received on social media, unlike most retirement announcements. 36-year-old Dillashaw is coming off a shoulder surgery, and as you recall, he hurt his shoulder before his latest title fight versus Aljamain Sterling at UFC 280. All right, Mike, what did you think of this announcement? I know we all kind of have our thoughts. We all put on our tinfoil hats here, but break it down. You probably know just as well as anyone what's going on in this sitch.
Yeah, I mean, TJ Dillashaw, I think, is obviously going to be out of action, unable to compete for a long time due to that shoulder injury that he had going into the Aljamain Sterling fight that was even more badly compromised going in. And we weren't going to see him fight for at least a year anyways. So I don't know. There's a lot of layers to this. How much does it have to do with the potential, Conor McGregor effect with USADA, right? Like that seems to be the strongest opinion or like analysis of this retirement from TJ. Is he doing it so he can get out of the USADA pool, do whatever he needs to do to recover? And then maybe we see him back sometime in 2024, maybe 2025. That seems honestly like the biggest likelihood to me. We haven't heard TJ speak about this directly yet. So I guess it remains to be seen what he actually has to say about this whole situation. But just kind of putting on, as you said, George, the investigative hat and, knowing how the sport works and all the things that are going on, the moving parts, that would be my biggest guess. But I guess for now, we take their word for it. TJ Dillashaw is retired. Obviously, his story is one we could sit and talk about here for a very long time. We don't have, all the hours to go through the many transitions from his time at Team Alpha Male and all the fallout. And of course, the having to surrender his belt due to his, USADA situation and the suspension. There's been a lot with TJ Dillashaw's career here. And depending on how you look at that, is he the best bantamweight of all time? Where does he rank and all that? There's a lot of different things that go into it. He's given us a lot of great fights, though. And if I had to sit here right now and make a prediction, I don't think we've seen the last of them.
That's kind of how I feel as well. So goes, do you think the retirement sticks or you think he'll be back? And you can fill in however you want why you would think that. Maybe I was leading you guys too much with the tinfoil stuff. But honestly, it's what people are thinking in our sport. We're all grown-ups here, so that's why I threw it out.
Well, why not? I mean, I think we all are thinking that. I think I'm with Mike. I think he comes back. What's he got to lose at this point? People are going to say whatever they're going to say. They're going to say it regardless, right? Because of his history. They're still going to hate him after what happened in that last fight, what he did. People are still going to be upset. The guy's got really nothing to lose by doing things that way. I don't think he's ever going to win people over or become a popular fighter in that regard. But fighting is very much something that's been a part of this dude's life for a very long time. And I don't think he can disconnect from something like that. So I think we will see him back in the UFC.
All right, Fada, retirement sticks or not?
No, I don't think so. TJ's too much of kind of like a psycho competitor. And he even said it like after the fight with Sterling, like there was no way he was going to walk out that way. So that's why I was very surprised all of a sudden to hear about the retirement news. I do believe it's probably to get out of the USADA testing pool, but why not just get out of it without announcing a retirement? Or, I mean, it didn't come out. That's why I would like to hear from TJ Dillashaw himself and see, like, if I expected him to put out a statement, at least on social media or something, but he hasn't. He's probably just emotional and upset. I mean, having to go through, he kind of knew, right, that he came into that fight, probably underestimated Sterling, saying that he thought he was going to win with one arm or whatnot. I mean, Sterling's a grappler. This isn't even... it's one thing if he's fighting somebody who's got no wrestling, then maybe he would have felt that. But I mean, we all know what Sterling was going to try to do. So unfortunate for TJ. Maybe he was holding on to the hope that he was going to manage to come out of or win the fight, but it was going to be hard for him to come out unscathed. But I think it's just unfortunate because the injuries keep piling on. Similar thing to Darren Till now that we're talking about, the injuries piling on. They just force you to take time off. And but I do believe we'll see him back. He's got a legacy. Obviously, people will say it's tainted because of the EPO stuff, and people are wondering if he was on EPO or took PEDs in his previous performances, although, it was said that he was tested for all the previous fights. But regardless, I think TJ's done some amazing work. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch, really, always has been. So he's done some incredible work in the bantamweight division, two-time champ. He just I don't know if he can become champ or be at the top again. But hey, we saw Dominic Cruz come back after all of those years and surprised by beating TJ Dillashaw. So the competitor that Dillashaw is, I doubt that this is it for him. I believe he's going to come back, and I believe he's going to want a top-level fighter as well. We just don't know what he's going to look like. 36 years old. When is he going to be back and everything? But I do believe we'll see him again.
Yeah. All right. We'll see. The Twitter reacts, though. Whew, it was ugly. All right. So this one's kind of more for me. I got the 3 experts here. I want to pick your guys' brain. Listen, the night before at Bellator 289, right, we had Rafion Stotts win a split decision. It was 248-47s in favor of him, but there was this outlandish 50-45 on the other side, submitted by longtime judge Douglas Crosby. Now, 24 hours later, I hear his name pop up at the UFC. I rarely hear him in Nevada, to be honest with you guys, but he was flown in, and it bothered me. I mean, he was one of the Pimblett judges. It just bothered me because, in my opinion, even though I disagreed with this decision, I still feel like when it's overwhelming as much as it was, the fighters, the notables, so many people chiming in that it was just a poor scorecard. Yet the fighters' careers were in his hands 24 hours later. Guys, do you think something should be done by a commission like Nevada, who sees what might have happened 24 hours before and just says, hey, listen, we're not going to need you this weekend? Or maybe even the UFC, could they have seen that and then look on the paper and see the judges that are working and saying, hey, no, this guy needs to take at least a week off or figure out, let them reevaluate what happened, because that score was pretty egregious. Goes, let me go to you first. What do you think?
Well, something has to happen, right? Doesn't it come down to accountability, credibility, right? Like there's a lot of things that go into this with judging. You have to hold these guys accountable. There has to be consistency, is the word that I was looking for. And we don't have that. And there are minor steps that you could take forward to kind of fix that. And I think the first one is sometimes you just have to grab someone and put them on the bench. It doesn't mean that they're a bad player, right? In the NBA, if somebody's having a bad night, it doesn't mean that you're a bad player if they put you on the bench. Sometimes you just need to step away for a little bit, right? And figure things out. In this particular case, when you have it 50-45 in one direction and it's the wrong direction, and when you think about it, even if he went 50-45 the other way, it still wouldn't make sense. Like nothing about the scorecard made sense. You have to put that person on the bench. They have to chill, and you have to figure this out, not throw them right back into the fire. So yeah, I was very disappointed in seeing that. And I really hope that somebody just steps up and says something about it. Take accountability for what happened.
How about you, Mike? You were, again, at T-Mobile Arena. Was there any chatter about this, amongst the media or people behind the scenes?
Not immediately, just because, we go right into the main event after the Paddy fight. We don't see the scorecards. But, man, I have some strong feelings on this. Like, Douglas Crosby, this man does not belong here any longer. How do you give Danny Sabatello 50-45, obviously based on control, right? That's what he did in that fight. That's how you give him the round. And then not give Jared Gordon the fight based on control when he was doing, similar things. Like, how does that make sense? It doesn't. The guy is in Connecticut one night, and then he flies to Nevada the next night and judges a UFC event. How is he supposed to be in his best state of mind, changing time zones, probably tired? Who knows how well he slept? Like, this is insane that Nevada used him in this scenario after he was in Bellator the night before. Like, what is going on here? And Douglas Crosby has been a menace judging fights in our sport for a very long time now, well over a decade. He's submitted horrible scorecard after horrible scorecard for a very long time now, and he has not had any credit, had to take any credibility for it. The commissions continue to use them in New York, Nevada, Connecticut, all these different states. I don't get it. If you don't know who this man is, go look at a story that one of our colleagues at MMA Media, Chuck Mindenhall, wrote a few years ago. He got to spend some time with Douglas Crosby, and this man clearly does not have the wires connected perfectly in his brain. He did an absolutely bizarre podcast with Chael Sonnen years ago. The audio is still floating out there somewhere. Listen to that, and you'll know that he has his own mindset, his own perspective on how these fights should be scored, not going along with the unified rules, not going on how it should be done. And it continues to happen with him. I don't even know what to say at this point. The commissions won't answer for it. He won't answer for it. What are we supposed to do? Like, it blows my mind that Douglas Crosby continues to get judging assignments at the highest level of the sport.
All right, Fada, we got less than a minute. Any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been under heat for a lot of his scorecards. I mean, the Paddy one, I think all three judges kind of gave it to Paddy, so that was a unanimous decision. So, and it was actually Chris Lee that gave Paddy 10-9 in round 3. But just generally speaking, the fact that he keeps getting assigned these big fights, so this was the co-main event on Saturday. The fact that he keeps getting assigned these big fights, and you know, it's funny because I was looking at the earlier scorecards on this UFC 282. They were fine. Nothing crazy. It always seems like it's the big fights that he seems to be throwing crazy scorecards for. It's obviously the Sabatello and Stotts one is a big one. It's a championship fight. And then this Paddy. But I was looking at his early ones, 282. Nothing wrong with that. I agreed with everything. So it's kind of weird. I don't know what the issue is here with him. But the fact that he keeps calling these massive fights is what's alarming. He shouldn't call any fights. I'm not saying the prelim fights he should get called unfairly or anything, but it's crazy that he keeps getting assigned these big fights and throwing out these scorecards that just seem to be completely out of left field. Should point it that way, completely left field. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to see that he still gets assigned these big fights. And I think, yeah, I know he's done some podcasts and stuff like that, but I think if judges can be spoken to after specific fights, like after result, like just to get their take, it seems like he's looking at something completely different.
Great stuff from my colleagues here on MMA Junkie. Expect this every week, Mondays, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It's the Spinning Back Clique. My scorecard is you all get A's. Ken, the producer, an A as well for producing great B-roll. Kamikaze, cannot forget him with the artwork. The chat room, man, you guys are doing well. Kind of a B-. He kind of started too much of the poor takes in there. Improve next week. We'll see what happens here on Spinning Back Clique.